Wondershare Filmora is a great product, but they have some of the slimiest business practices in the industry. But those other practices are not what this video is about. Here is some good advice. Never tell someone you will love them forever. There has been a lot of chatter recently about a software licensing fiasco by Wondershare, the makers of the product Filmora. I want to weigh in on this because I use Filmora and it is a decent product, although I do have some unrelated complaints about their business practices. Also, I am in the process of reworking the licensing for my own company, and I was already in the process of developing a video on software licensing in general. I don't have a lot of facts on the Filmora case, so I'm going to keep the discussion in general terms, but from what it seems, this is an example of such a colossal business failure that is worthy of a Harvard Business School case study with all of the legal, ethical, and customer relationship ramifications. I am going to talk about why this is such a failure for the company and what their options are and what I would choose if I were in charge. In general, there are two types of software licenses. They are perpetual and subscription. A perpetual software license typically means that you pay for the software once and the software is yours to use forever, with some practical considerations, of course. For example, it is possible that the software you buy today will not be compatible with future computers. I don't know how much of a problem this is now because the evolution of the popular operating systems has stabilized and the software you buy today may well run on operating systems 25 years from now. But I have plenty of software applications 25 years old that will not run on Windows 11. Just for historical perspective, it was the Windows XP to Vista transition in the late 2000s that broke a lot of legacy software as Microsoft plugged numerous security holes in Windows. But the important point of a perpetual license is that you can choose to purchase upgrades or not purchase upgrades. Companies may offer free upgrades as well as technical support, but only for a limited time. Once that time expired, and this is the important point, the company was free from any further obligation to you. The alternative is a subscription-based license. These are typically annual, but in larger enterprise applications may be negotiated for longer periods of time. The customer gets free upgrades and some level of support for the length of the subscription. Once the subscription ends, the customer is no longer allowed to use the software. And the important point is that once the subscription ends, the company has no further obligation to the customer. Software companies like perpetual licenses with new products because they can generate more money upfront to cover the initial cost of software development. But as the product and the company matures, they like subscriptions because they produce consistent recurring revenue, which makes them more attractive as an acquisition target. Customers might prefer perpetual licenses because once you pay the fee, you can use the software without limitation as long as you can find a computer to run it on. But some business customers prefer subscriptions because it allows them to expense the cost of the software over whatever period of time they use the subscription. Of course, the benefit of a perpetual license is erased if the software must contact a server somewhere to be activated and the company or activation server no longer exists. I've had this happen. From what I can gather from the discussion, the possible mistake with Filmora was that they offered a perpetual license with free upgrades without an end date. Not only was the software that you bought at the time for unlimited use, but all future upgrades for your lifetime were available free. If this is true, this saddled the company with a never-ending liability that was difficult to quantify and impossible to eliminate. Why is this a problem? This is like a poison pill that prevents the company from ever being acquired. Any potential partner for merger or acquisition is going to scratch their head at trying to value this lifetime obligation to a subset of customers where every future upgrade must be provided at no cost. I'm going to discuss the problem from the point of view of the company. To understand this, you must accept that the foremost concern of any company is maximizing the value to shareholders within a managed level of risk. Of course, implicit in this is that there is some consideration, in fact, significant consideration given to the concerns of the customers, but not at all costs. So let's consider a software company that for whatever reason made the colossal mistake of selling lifetime upgrades for a single price, saddling themselves with this never-ending liability. The only legitimate reason I can possibly think of to do this is being in serious danger of going out of business and needing to generate revenue quickly, creating a problem to be dealt with later, likely by a different management team. Alternatively, maybe they thought it was a legitimate way to win customers from their competitors, and they choose to ignore the long-term consequences for the short-term gain. But really, I think it was just an accidental fuck-up. However it happened, it happened. In economics, this is called sunk cost. You cannot go back and undo it. Being an adult means being able to choose the best of a bunch of bad options. In this case, none of the options are good. They all have legal and ethical consequences. Of course, in choosing possible solutions, it may depend on certain facts such as the exact wording of the license agreement and the actual number of customers with the license. Let's assume that the license agreement is such that any legal dispute could be decided against the company and that the number of customers involved is large enough that the problem cannot be ignored. Although over time, if the company grows, those customers will be a decreasing percentage of total users and may no longer be material. But for now, let's assume that is not an option. The first option is to simply declare that you are no longer honoring the licenses and just deal with the customer backlash, including potential legal ramifications. You might consider this ripping the Band-Aid off. Of course, with today's social media, this might all blow up in your face or lead to class action lawsuits. But it might also go under the social media radar and be the fastest and easiest remedy to the situation. Over time, it could all be forgotten and the problem could effectively be considered resolved. In the scenario that does not play out so well, it can draw attention to your company and the pickle it is in, making it more difficult to sneak by alternative solutions in the future. Another option is to fork your product into two different tiers or versions. For example, a standard version, which has more limited features, and a higher-end professional version. The current lifetime licenses stay with the standard version, which receives more limited upgrades, eventually just maintenance upgrades. The most sophisticated new features go to the professional version. The legality of this depends on the exact wording of the license agreement. This would not be unusual. It is very common for software applications to have limited versions and enhanced versions, so there is precedent. Adobe did it with Photoshop in the 1990s, and Microsoft did it with Windows going back to the origins of Windows NT, which was the higher-end enterprise version of regular Windows. Microsoft also used to sell a lightweight version of Office called Works. Of course, these companies did it for different reasons, to attract customers in different market segments rather than to extract themselves from a sticky situation. The risk of this option includes the potential customer backlash, and furthermore, once you have split into two different product tiers, it is more difficult to reverse that direction, at least quickly, if it proves to be a mistake. A similar option is to simply rebrand the product and say the licenses do not apply to the new product. This is a drastic option which I don't think would be effective. For one thing, changing a product name that has a significant customer base eliminates all of the brand awareness that is built up over the years. Also, changing the name is an expensive proposition. You have to come up with a new name, change all the product and the documentation, marketing materials, and training materials. I have seen how much work it takes just to change a logo. I would not want to rely on courts to rule in my favor. I can just see the opposition lawyer asking how much of the code base for the old product went into the new product. It would be difficult to concoct a legitimate answer that did not make it obvious that the name change was just to eliminate the license liability. Another option, which admittedly is partly kicking the problem down the road, is to leave the current licensing scheme as it is, but to increase the number of paid add-ons to the software that do not fall under the license agreement. So the customers with the lifetime license still get their software upgrades, but over time, there is a more compelling reason for them to get out of their current license agreement. This is not a new version of the product in and of itself. Each upgrade has all the features of the previous version as well as the enhancements. Customers have no obligation to purchase the add-ons, but the add-ons are sufficiently compelling to cause some percentage of the customers to leave their old license for the new enhancements. Obviously, this is a condition of getting the new enhancements. The difficulty is that the value proposition must be compelling. For example, maybe this is 1 year of a suite of other products at the company. Obviously, not every customer will choose this alternative. The goal is to reduce the number of customers with lifetime licenses such that the liability is no longer material and is no longer a barrier to potential acquisition. You might think that this liability is not a concern for potential acquisition. After all, the license agreement was made with the old company and not the new company, so the liability is not transferable. I am no legal expert on this matter, but it certainly would represent a risk that needs to be disclosed, and even if it did provide a legal exit from the licenses, the new company would still have to deal with the potential customer backlash, not only with the new ownership and associated changes, but in ending of generous license terms for a select group of customers. In choosing the best solution to this problem, there are other questions that could influence our decision for which we would only have answers from within the company itself. For example, are we in talks with a possible acquirer? What is our market share against the competitors? How easy is it for customers to switch to a competing product if they are disgruntled by your behavior? How are you positioned against competitors in terms of price and value? So as I said, being an adult means being able to choose the best of a bunch of bad options. Suppose the board hired you as the new CEO specifically to fix this problem. What would you choose of my options, or select one of your own? I'm going to lay out another option which I think would be the first that I would pursue, at least in terms of assessing the cost and ramifications. I would make an offer to those license holders explaining that the current license was a mistake and is unsustainable. I would make some kind of offer to the customers to exchange their current license for some other variation, perhaps with a refund of some type. The potential for this as a viable solution would depend on how many customers there are with this license and the assessed value of the license. The goal is not to transition all the customers to the new license necessarily, but just get enough that the old license is no longer a material liability. Excluding that, to me, the best alternative option I can think of is to split the product into two tiers. The lifetime license stays with the lower tier, which over time becomes diminished in importance and maybe at some time receives only maintenance upgrades, while all significant new features are added to the higher tier, which is not supported by the license. I think this solution honors the license requirement with managed legal risk and with some reasonable ethics to the customer. I know that blaming the customer is not the right thing to do, but really, if you bought a software license with a lifetime of free upgrades, you did not think that it would be a problem for the company at some point? So that is my assessment. I'm curious what other options people can come up with. I hope to do a video with more detail on software licensing in the future, so be sure to look for that, and thanks for watching.